Hello and welcome to Last Week in AWS. Today's my birthday, so if you want to get me a present, please log into your AWS account and turn off a managed NAT gateway. Now, there's been a lot of bustle around the destructive AI prompt that was published in an Amazon Q extension for VS Code last week. I've had a number of very interesting conversations with AWS since this whole thing dropped, and I think I can pretty safely say that the worst part of the whole debacle is how they have mismanaged talking about it. There's more information coming this week, but I'm of the opinion that the biggest threat they're facing right now is their own messaging strategy. It is approaching catastrophic, particularly in crisis situations. Their security teams, on the other hand, are wonderful at reminding me just how very capable they are. Now, let's see what else they got up to last week.
This episode is brought to you by Augment Code. You're a professional software engineer. Vibes won't cut it. Augment Code is the only AI assistant built for real engineering teams. It ingests your entire repo, millions of lines, tens of thousands of files, several of databases, so every suggestion lands in context and keeps you in flow. With Augment's context engine, get instant answers about any part of your codebase. Need to understand how authentication flows through your microservices? Ask once, get the complete picture across every service and dependency. Where other tools stall, Augment Code sprints. And Augment Code never trains on your code, so your team's intellectual property stays yours. Augment works in your favorite editors, so you don't have to switch tooling. Keep using VS Code, JetBrains, Android Studio, or even my beloved Vim. Don't hire an AI for vibes. Get the agent that knows you and your codebase best. Start your 14-day free trial at augmentcode.com.
Amazon CloudWatch adds IPv6 support. Okay, we've finished charging as much as we're likely to be able to get per IPv4 address, so you can go ahead now and roll out the IPv6 support. Now, that probably didn't happen, but if it did, would you be surprised? Amazon Connect announces per-day pricing for external voice connectors. This is great for bursty things like telethons, or our CEO said something truly unfortunate into a microphone, and now all the customers are calling us to cancel. Amazon EC2 now supports skipping the operating system shutdown when stopping or terminating instances. At long last, we get the API equivalent of tearing the power cable out the back of the server rack like you're rip-starting a lawnmower. It's time for Dewey the data center tech to get some cloud certs. Amazon RDS for DB2 adds support for group-based authorization with self-managed Active Directory. This is roughly equivalent to successfully teaching your great-grandfather how to use a rotary phone to call your other great-grandfather. DB2, for those of you who are blissfully unaware, is IBM's database that was already considered a legacy system when the Berlin Wall was standing. Feature requests for this platform are almost exclusively in either one of two camps. Please give me a different database, or please put me out of my misery. This is like watching someone install CarPlay in a Model T Ford. It's wildly technically impressive and also utterly pointless. Simplify AWS organization tag policies using new wildcard statement. When they pointed the James Webb Telescope at an empty patch of sky, they discovered that no matter where they pointed the thing, the view was completely full of stars. I used to think that the configuration for AWS services outside of IAM policies was likely empty, but nope. That's about to be full of stars too. AWS Private CA now supports issuing up to 100 million certificates per CA. This is huge news for folks who want to secure IoT fleets, run huge numbers of ephemeral microservices, or give every citizen of Spain a pair of certificates as a commemorative keepsake. AWS Service Reference Information now supports actions for last access services. This gives information about IAM access analyzers supported IAM actions in a programmatic way, so you can IAM while you IAM, just like Popeye. I am what I am. Cost Optimization Hub now supports account names and optimization opportunities. This is amazing. Please bring it to various account-specific emails next. Yes, I am fully aware the Lambda runtime version is deprecating. Thank you. Simplify serverless development with console to IDE and remote debugging for AWS Lambda. This is a big deal. I am so very tired of having to deploy new packages every time I change a single line in the Lambda function, only to have it fail because I'm also so very tired of not knowing what a linter is or when one might use one. Building resilient multi-tenant systems with Amazon SQS Fair Queues. Okay, I want to speak to the first company to implement the new fair queuing system in a multi-tenant architecture, but who also offers customers their own private queue in return for more money. If this is you, please reach out. 1 year of Valkey, open source innovations, and Elastic Cache version 8.1 for Valkey. Year 1 of Valkey was reached 3 months ago. Having used Valkey, that 3-month delay is by a landslide the slowest thing I've ever heard of touching it because it's fiendishly quick. Bob's used books. Build a .NET serverless application on AWS, Part 1, Deployment and Setup. Bob's Used Books is the perfect AWS sample project. It's unrealistic, it's over-engineered, and it's firmly convinced that despite building on a full Microsoft stack, you're somehow going to insist that every part of the yak is an AWS service. Why 2025 is the inflection point for AWS cloud migration. This blog post 404 is because they forgot that 2025 was already pre-booked to be the year of the Linux desktop instead. Supercharging ad creative with Amazon Bedrock and Amazon Nova. How AI is revolutionizing content generation for advertising and marketing use cases. At long last, AWS has found a way to automate the production of shitty ad copy so nobody ever again has to suffer the indignity of hiring a writer with taste. Now wait, you might reasonably think, why is AWS well positioned to do this? In response to that, I challenge you to dream bigger. Who's better situated to lead the creative revolution than the cloud provider whose idea of compelling storytelling is a 5,000-word product announcement that somehow forgets to mention what the product does? This isn't revolutionizing creative work, it's euthanizing it and stapling an AWS logo to the corpse. And not the good AWS box logo of yesteryear, the boring monotone smirk one that they're using now. Boost cold start recommendations with VLLM on AWS Trainium. Been looking around for a while trying to find out where the Trainium chips are being deployed. AWS sure talks about them an awful lot, but no customers I talk to are using them for anything. But at last the mystery's been solved. All the Trainium chips are in architecture diagrams. Manage multi-tenant Bedrock cost using application inference profiles. This is the real problem that I have with the venerable AWS billing system. It is a technological wonder, but it's slow. Too slow for this use case. Therefore, the solution that AWS goes through uses CloudWatch, which is its own separate bucket of awful. Meanwhile, I had to track down a runaway Lambda the other day that was spiking my Anthropic bill. Their per API key cost display was near real time, and I had it sorted out in less time than it took me to read the linked solution.
This episode is sponsored by my own company, the Duckbill Group. Having trouble with your AWS bill? Perhaps it's time to renegotiate a contract with them. Maybe you're just wondering how to predict what's going on in the wide world of AWS. Well, that's where the Duckbill Group comes in to help. Remember, you can't duck the Duckbill bill, which I am reliably informed by my business partner is absolutely not our motto.
Launching Amazon CloudWatch Generative AI Observability in preview. Hey there, I'm Gen AI and I hallucinate everything. Hi, I'm CloudWatch, and I hallucinate new insane metric dimensions near constantly. We should hang out. How Truth for Life transformed its viewer analytics while optimizing costs. It's heartwarming to see a Bible ministry embrace AWS, the only cloud provider where your faith will absolutely be tested. AWS Security Incident Response, the customer's journey to accelerating the incident response lifecycle. Now, I am but a humble cloud economist. I am not an expert in corporate comms or in marketing. But that said, it seems to me that it's probably a poor idea to publish a post like this one day after your company's security fumble led to code execution on customer endpoints. At least give it a news cycle first. Beyond IAM access keys, modern authentication approaches for AWS. This post is not wrong. However, every single approach they list in this article serves to increase the friction between a developer and achieving what they're actually using AWS to do. There needs to be a massive authentication rethink at AWS because their current approach has become untenable. Be secure or actually do your job is a terrible choice, and we've seen what developers understandably choose when they're on a deadline. 5 facts about how the Cloud Act actually works from the security blog. Did you know that the largest mustelid ever known is the prehistoric Megalictus, which existed in North America during the Miocene period? It was a roughly 200-pound jaguar-sized weasel ferret thing that went extinct about 18 million years ago. I'll come back to that. In this post, AWS is being very careful about what they're saying and what they're not saying, and it stinks of bullshit. Let's break it down. They keep emphasizing enterprise or government customer content data stored outside the US, which leaves the door open for consumer or smaller business corporate data, data stored inside the US, and or metadata. They hedge a lot about the technical capability to comply with U.S. government requests, ignoring the real question, if Andy Jassy walks into the room and demands customer X's data, will you give it to him? Further note the careful phrasing they use when they emphasize, since 2023, most law enforcement requests that AWS receives come from authorities outside of the United States. This deflects from U.S. government requests by highlighting foreign ones, while not actually saying anything of substance about U.S. requests. They describe all of their procedural protections, redirecting to customers and challenging requests, etc. But notably, they don't say these procedures have actually prevented disclosures, just that they haven't disclosed one very specific category of data. And to that end, their statistic is so narrowly crafted, enterprise government outside the U.S. since 2020, that it's almost meaningless. It's like saying we've never sold red cars on Tuesdays. Technically true, but suspiciously specific. They also compare themselves to OVH, which has a completely different corporate and technical architecture specifically built from the ground up to address this concern. They're essentially admitting compliance with government requests while trying to sound reassuring through extremely careful language boundaries. This brings us back to Megalictus. It turns out that the giant weasel did not in fact go extinct, but is instead alive and well at AWS writing blog posts like this one. Introducing SRA Verify, an AWS security reference architecture assessment tool. And it says, the AWS SRA is a holistic set of guidelines for deploying the full complement of AWS security services in a multi-account environment. I'm sorry, the full complement? So to review, that is apparently Control Tower, Guard Duty, IAM Access Analyzer, a bunch of AWS config settings, Detective, Firewall Manager, Security Hub, Inspector, and Macy. And I'm sure I'm missing a couple in there somewhere. Now, this is really inefficient. So here's what you do instead. Call up your AWS account manager and buy them a house. It is way faster and you'll hit break even financially by month 3. New white paper available. AI CPA SOC 2 Compliance Guide on AWS. I tried to use this as a bedtime story for my daughters, put myself to sleep instead, and woke up to find that they had done my nails in some lovely pastels. AWS Generative AI for Developers Professional Certificate. This is a certificate, not a certification, which basically distills down to you getting AWS's seal of approval for being a very special boy to put on your resume. There's the whole security update that's listed near the end here because it keeps getting updated for the Visual Studio Code version 1.84 for the Q developer extension. As of this recording, there's been a couple of updates. There needs to be at least one more because the way it currently stands gives you a remarkably unfair to AWS's excellent security team's impression that I am firmly convinced is not accurate because those people are excellent. And now, finally, on the lighter side, they had a post. Test 01. Okay, I could say a lot about this, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I am going to direct you to someone else. Please welcome Werner Herzog as he reads from In the Bleak Theater of the Cloud.
There exists, quietly and unannounced, a page, a digital whisper echoing in the boundless void that simply reads test blog. No title, no author, no meaning, no end. Just a forgotten post, time-stamped with the sorrow of 1,000 sprint reviews. It is Test 01, the first test, perhaps not the last. A dry run of bureaucracy cloaked in YAML, exiled from the Jira board into production. This page was not meant for our eyes, yet it remains, published, unguarded, unmarred by shame or AWS's usual 27-step publication process involving legal, marketing, and at least one overworked TPM whose soul has long since left their body. The content is sparse. A headline, a breadcrumb. The void gazes back and says nothing. Not even a single sponsored link to Amazon Bedrock. No reference architecture diagrams, no comforting lies about cost optimization. Only the raw, unadorned silence of a blog engine used without purpose, without care. One imagines a lone AWS engineer deep in the fluorescent gulag of Seattle, piping Test 01 at 2:17 a.m., unsure whether their effort will ever see daylight. It did, and now it haunts us all. This is not just a blog post. It is an existential scream, a declaration that even in a trillion-dollar cloud, entropy wins. The database has a crack. The scheduler failed a mutex. The chaos monkey learned to write. And still the page persists.
And that's what happened last week in AWS. I'm cloud economist Corey Quinn. This has been a hell of a week. I'm taking the rest of the day off. I'll talk to you all tomorrow.